They keep asking me our secret. There are moments when everything looks completely ordinary on the outside, yet somewhere beyond what your eyes can see, something has already shifted. Last night was one of those moments. Something happened that you were never supposed to notice immediately, something so unexpected that even now, you may be wondering why you suddenly felt different when you woke up. Maybe you opened your eyes with a strange feeling in your heart. Maybe you felt unusually peaceful for a few seconds, or perhaps you remembered something that made no sense at all. Do not brush that feeling aside. Do not skip this moment. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. And the reason you are hearing these words right now is connected to what happened last night. There is a secret that people keep asking about. They keep wondering what changed, why certain things suddenly feel different, why the atmosphere around you seems to be carrying a message that cannot quite be explained. But the truth is much deeper than a simple answer. Something moved behind the scenes while you were unaware. A conversation happened. A decision was made. A realization finally reached the person who had been silent for far too long. And what makes this so powerful is that you may have already seen tiny signs of it without understanding their meaning. That unexpected thought. That sudden memory. That feeling that someone was about to contact you. That strange sense that an old chapter was quietly closing while a new one was preparing to open. These things may have seemed unrelated, but tonight, they begin to connect. Don't skip, because the next part of this story changes the way you may look at everything that happened recently. There are moments when the biggest revelations do not arrive with noise. They arrive quietly, almost invisibly, and only later do you realize that the entire direction of your life had already begun changing. Last night carried that kind of moment. Someone discovered something they could no longer ignore. Someone finally understood something about you that they had misunderstood for a long time. And perhaps most surprising of all, the secret everyone keeps asking about was never really about what you were doing. It was about what was happening inside you. While people were watching the surface, you were changing underneath it. While they were asking questions, you were becoming someone they could no longer predict. While they were waiting for you to react, you were learning how to remain calm. And that silence became powerful. Your silence made people wonder. Your distance made people think. Your decision not to explain everything made them realize that they did not know as much about you as they believed. That is why they keep asking. That is why there is so much curiosity surrounding you. Something huge is waiting for you, but before you discover what it is, you need to understand why last night matters. There was a moment when the energy around this situation changed. It was not dramatic. It was not obvious. But it was real enough to make someone stop, think, and reconsider what they had believed. And once that realization happened, there was no going back to the old way of seeing things. So stay till the end. Don't skip. Listen carefully, because sometimes one sentence can reveal what an entire year of confusion could not explain. The first clue appeared when nobody was expecting it. Imagine a room where everything seems normal, yet one person suddenly becomes quiet because a thought has crossed their mind that they cannot dismiss. That is what this story is about. Someone has been carrying questions for longer than you realize. They have replayed conversations. They have remembered small details. They have wondered why certain moments felt different around you. They may have looked at your actions and tried to find a simple explanation, but every explanation left something unanswered. And then last night, something clicked. One small detail connected with another. A memory returned at exactly the right moment. Suddenly, something that once seemed meaningless became important. This is where the secret began to reveal itself. Not through a dramatic announcement, but through realization. And that is why you must not scroll away now. Don't skip this part, because the most interesting discoveries often happen just before the truth becomes visible. There is a reason certain people have been watching your journey more closely than you think. They notice that you stopped seeking approval. They notice that you became more selective about what you shared. They notice that you stopped explaining yourself to everyone. At first, they may have interpreted your silence as weakness, uncertainty, or distance. But eventually, they began to understand something completely different. Your silence was not emptiness. It was preparation. You were gathering yourself. You were becoming more certain. You were learning to protect your peace without needing to announce it. And that transformation created a question in the minds of those who were used to seeing the old version of you. Who are you becoming? Why are you suddenly so calm? What do you know that they do not know? Those questions grew stronger until last night, when someone finally reached a conclusion. The answer was not that you had become cold. The answer was that you had become clear. There is an enormous difference between being distant because you are lost and being quiet because you finally know where you are going. Someone recognized that difference. Someone finally understood that you were not waiting for permission to move forward. You were already moving forward. And that realization may be the very reason everything suddenly feels different now. Stay till the end, because there is another layer to this story that has not yet been revealed. Something huge is waiting for you, and it begins with the one thing you stopped doing, chasing explanations from people who were never willing to give you the truth. Then came the moment that nobody could easily explain. There are certain nights when a person lies awake and suddenly remembers something they had tried to forget. Perhaps it is a conversation from months ago. Perhaps it is a promise that was never fulfilled. Perhaps it is the expression on someone's face when you walked away without arguing. Last night, one of those memories returned for a reason. Someone started connecting the past with the present. And the picture became clearer. They remembered how much you gave without demanding recognition. They remembered how often you were there when nobody was watching. They remembered the moments when you could have responded harshly but chose silence instead. And now, looking backward, those choices appear completely different. What once looked like hesitation now looks like patience. What once looked like weakness now looks like restraint. What once looked like uncertainty now looks like wisdom. That change in perspective can shake a person deeply because it forces them to admit that they may have judged you incorrectly. This is why the secret has become such a powerful subject. People are not simply curious about what happened. They are curious about how you managed to change without announcing your transformation. They expected noise, but you gave them quiet. They expected you to remain where they left you, but you kept moving. They expected you to keep explaining yourself, but eventually you stopped. And when a person stops explaining themselves, others are often forced to confront their own assumptions. Last night, someone confronted theirs. Don't skip now. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and you are getting closer to the part that will make the title of this story suddenly feel much more meaningful. There was another realization hidden inside that moment. Someone recognized that your future could no longer be measured by your past. That is a powerful realization because people often become comfortable with old versions of us. They remember our mistakes, our uncertain moments, our difficult seasons, and they quietly assume those things define us forever. But growth has a way of making old descriptions outdated. You may still remember who you were, but you are not required to remain that person. And last night, someone saw evidence of that change. Perhaps it was something you said. Perhaps it was something you did not say. Perhaps it was simply the calmness with which you handled something that would once have shaken you. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Someone realized that the old way of understanding you no longer worked. And once that happens, curiosity becomes unavoidable. They begin asking questions. They begin looking for answers. They begin wondering what else they missed. That is why they keep asking about the secret. They are not only trying to discover what happened. They are trying to understand how you became different without them noticing the exact moment it happened. But there was one detail that made the entire situation even more surprising. It was not something enormous. In fact, it was almost invisible. Yet sometimes the smallest detail carries the greatest meaning. Someone noticed that you no longer reacted to the same things. The words that once affected you did not have the same power. The situations that once consumed your attention suddenly seemed smaller. The opinions that once occupied your mind became background noise. That kind of change cannot be faked for long. It appears naturally in the way a person speaks, pauses, chooses, and walks away. And when people notice it, they become curious because they want to know what caused it. Was there a particular moment? Was there a particular person? Was there a particular realization? What happened that changed everything? Last night, someone believed they finally understood the answer. They realized that the turning point was not one event. It was the accumulation of many small moments. Every disappointment taught you something. Every delay taught you patience. Every unanswered question taught you not to depend on someone else's explanation for your own peace. Every closed door forced you to notice another direction. Every season that felt like nothing was happening was quietly preparing you for a moment when everything would begin moving at once. That is why the present moment matters. You may think you are waiting, but perhaps you are actually standing at the edge of a transition. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and the next revelation is connected to a truth that many people discover only after they have spent too long looking in the wrong direction. Sometimes we believe the answer is outside us, when the real change is happening within us. We wait for someone else to return. We wait for someone to apologize. We wait for circumstances to become perfect. We wait for a sign that tells us it is finally safe to move forward. But there comes a point when you stop waiting and realize that your life cannot remain paused forever. Something inside you begins to say, "Enough." Not in anger. Not in bitterness. Just enough. Enough confusion. Enough second-guessing. Enough trying to convince people of your value. Enough carrying questions that were never yours to answer. That quiet decision can transform everything. And perhaps that is what someone sensed last night. They sensed that you had reached a place where their old influence could no longer control your direction. That realization can be uncomfortable for people who were accustomed to having access to your attention. But it can also be deeply revealing. Because when you stop chasing, you discover who chooses to come closer on their own. When you stop forcing conversations, you discover who actually wants to communicate. When you stop proving yourself, you discover who already recognized your worth. That is the secret they keep asking about. Now listen closely, because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The person who had been asking questions may not have been looking for information at all. They may have been looking for certainty. They wanted to know whether you had truly moved forward. They wanted to know whether you still remembered. They wanted to know whether the door they assumed would always remain open was still open. And last night, they may have realized something they were not prepared to accept. You had changed the way you viewed that door. You were no longer standing there waiting. You were looking ahead. That difference is enormous. A person can remain emotionally connected to a memory without remaining trapped inside it. You can remember someone without needing them back. You can appreciate what happened without returning to what hurt. You can forgive without reopening every chapter. You can care without abandoning your own direction. And that kind of maturity often surprises people because it cannot be manipulated by pressure. They cannot pull you backward simply by reminding you of the past. They cannot control you through unanswered questions. They cannot keep you waiting forever. At some point, you become more interested in what is ahead than in what is behind. And perhaps last night, someone finally understood that. Don't skip this. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because this realization is only the beginning. There is another secret beneath the secret. The reason people keep asking what happened may be because they can sense that something is about to change, but they do not know what form that change will take. You may not know either. That is what makes this moment so powerful. Not knowing does not mean nothing is happening. Sometimes the most important chapters begin before we have the vocabulary to describe them. A new opportunity can appear before you understand why you are ready for it. A new connection can enter your life before you understand why the timing matters. A door can open before you even realize you had been standing near it. And sometimes a chapter ends quietly before the next one announces itself. Last night may have been one of those quiet turning points. Something was decided. Something was understood. Something that had been uncertain began moving toward clarity. And although you may not see the entire picture yet, you can feel that the atmosphere has changed. That feeling is important. Do not ignore it. Pay attention to what brings peace rather than confusion. Pay attention to what feels consistent rather than temporary. Pay attention to actions rather than promises. Pay attention to what remains when the excitement fades. Because the next chapter will not be built on dramatic words. It will be built on clarity, consistency, and a completely different version of you. Here is the part nobody expected to become important. The secret was never meant to be revealed all at once. If everything became obvious immediately, you might miss the significance of the small signs leading toward it. Think about how sunrise works. The sky does not suddenly become midday in 1 second. First, there is darkness. Then a faint change. Then a little more light. Then shapes become visible. Then colors return. Finally, you realize that the night has ended. Your current situation may be working in exactly the same way. Something has already begun, but the full picture has not appeared yet. That is why you may feel caught between two realities. Part of you is still looking at what used to be, while another part can sense that something new is approaching. That tension can feel strange, but it does not mean you are lost. It can mean you are transitioning. And transitions often make people uncomfortable because the old identity is fading while the new one is still becoming clear. Last night may have brought one of those moments of clarity. Someone realized that you are not as easy to predict anymore. They realized that you cannot be reduced to an old story. They realized that you have learned from what happened. And perhaps they also realized that the next decision belongs to you. That is a powerful shift. When someone once believed they could predict your response, but suddenly they cannot, they start asking questions. When someone once believed you would always remain available, but suddenly they see boundaries, they become curious. When someone once assumed you would always explain yourself, but suddenly you choose silence, they start wondering what you know. This is why the questions keep coming. But you do not need to reveal everything. Not every truth needs an announcement. Not every change needs an explanation. Some transformations are stronger when they are simply lived. Let people notice the difference through your actions. Let your peace speak. Let your consistency speak. Let your progress speak. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and the next part of this story is about the moment when someone realized that the secret was not something you were hiding from them. The secret was something they had failed to notice about you. They had been looking for an external event, but the real event was internal. You had become more aware of your value. You had become more careful with your energy. You had become less interested in proving your intentions to people who were committed to misunderstanding them. That change is difficult to reverse. Once you understand your own worth, certain situations lose their ability to control you. Once you learn what peace feels like, confusion becomes much harder to tolerate. Once you understand the difference between attention and genuine care, you stop being impressed by temporary excitement. And once you recognize that your future deserves your attention, the past begins to lose its grip. Then, just when the questions seemed to have no answer, one possibility became impossible to ignore. What if the thing you have been waiting for has already started moving toward you? What if the delay was not the end? What if the silence was not rejection? What if the uncertainty was simply the space between one chapter and another? These questions are not promises of a specific outcome. They are reminders that life can change direction without warning. One ordinary day can become the beginning of an extraordinary season. One conversation can change how you understand someone. One decision can redirect years of your life. One moment of courage can close a chapter that seemed impossible to leave. And one realization can make you wonder why you ever doubted yourself. Last night carried that kind of possibility. Something happened that made the old assumptions feel incomplete. Someone saw something differently. Someone understood that you were not waiting for the past to return. You were preparing for the future to become real. That distinction matters more than you know. Because when you stop measuring your future by what has already happened, you create room for something unexpected. Don't skip now. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, and this is where the emotional truth becomes impossible to ignore. There may have been moments when you wondered whether anyone noticed how hard you were trying. You may have wondered whether your patience mattered. You may have wondered whether your quiet decisions were making any difference. Perhaps you thought nobody saw the battles you never discussed, the choices you made privately, or the moments when you chose to keep going even though you were tired of explaining why. But unseen does not mean meaningless. Quiet progress is still progress. A hidden transformation is still a transformation. And sometimes people recognize it only after enough time has passed for the difference to become undeniable. That may be what